Welcome to Unposed. This show is made possible by the generosity of Mrs. Kristen Collier, her belief in this project, and her faith in the message behind it. Her support helped bring Unposed into the world, and it does not go unnoticed. I'm Amber Lane, an award-winning boudoir photographer, unofficial confidence coach, and a creator of a supportive online women's community that's been thriving since 2017. I used to think I just didn't get along with women. Not in a dramatic way, not in a women are too much way, just quietly, matter of fact, like it was a personality trait I had just accepted about myself. I was one of those women who would say, I just get along better with men, and at the time, that felt true. I felt neutral. It didn't feel like something that I needed to unpack. But looking back now, I don't think that belief came from who I really was. I think it came from what I learned very early on about what it costs to belong. And I want to speak about that today, about how we choose friends, about how aesthetics, lifestyle, and proximity to certain versions of womanhood can quietly shape our relationships, and about how excluding or pursuing friendships based on those things can keep us from the very women we need in order to grow. In 1999, when I was 13, I went to a birthday party for a girl in my small friend group. Now, I lived out in the country in a literal holler down the highway with no way to get into town on my own. My friends all lived close to each other, so I was already used to being the one who missed sleepovers or after-school hangs. I was often not there, not because I didn't want to be, but because I couldn't be. That night, we watched the movie Jawbreaker. It was new at the time. If you've seen it, you know it's about a group of girls who kidnap their friend as a birthday prank, tape her mouth shut, and she chokes on a jawbreaker and dies. I'm not giving anything away. That's like the beginning of the movie if you haven't seen it. The girl whose birthday it was loved Twizzlers. Someone had bought her a big container of them. At some point, two of the girls started talking about choking me with the Twizzlers, like the movie, like it was funny and clever. And what I remember most is how sudden it was, the shift, the giggling, the way there was suddenly this playful, giggly hate towards me that I didn't understand. So I laughed because that's what you do when you're 13 and you don't have the language to say this doesn't feel safe and you don't want to be the reason that the mood shifts at the party. That playful bullying went on for a while, sometimes from one of them, sometimes both, and then it stopped being playful, turned into really hateful bullying. And this was the early days of the internet, so it followed me home via email and MSN Messenger, and weirdly era-specific things like hacking my GeoCities website and changing all the words to talk about what an awful person I was. I honestly don't even want to get into the literal things that were said. It hurts me to think that kids that age speak to each other that way or can be so terribly cruel. This went on till I was about 15 and started spending all the free time I was allowed with my boyfriend rather than my girlfriends. Even after one of the girls had moved away to a school in another town, it was relentless for a few years. I still don't exactly know what started it in the first place. Years later, in my early 30s, the main bully actually apologized to me. She told me how much it affected her, especially after she had a child of her own. She never wanted her child to experience what she put me through, or maybe even worse, do the same thing she did to me to another kid. She even apologized for things I don't remember, because I had blocked them out completely. It was almost surprising how much she carried it with her, and how it stuck with her in such a haunting way for so many years. We were both stuck on it in our own ways for like half of our lives. And that early time in my life matters because it was one of the first times I learned that in groups of girls, sometimes survival looks like laughing something off, like minimizing yourself, like pretending you're in on the joke so you don't become the target of it. When I moved away to college, I was 18 and I was really lonely. As it turns out, the movies of the 90s and early 2000s were not entirely accurate, especially if you were going to a small college in a conservative, dry county area. I didn't make friends in my dorm or in my classes, and I had developed a pretty crippling social anxiety that made it difficult to try to go to any of the on-campus social events. I mostly sat outside my dorm, listening to the Smiths on my headphones, smoking cigarettes while avoiding eye contact with anyone who walked by. My roommate and I were randomly assigned and didn't really get along, and I spent most of my time on a forum talking to my online friends, shout out Buddy Pick, because that's where I felt understood and valued. One of my closest friends at the time, Candace, was still a senior in high school during my freshman year of college, and she was determined to break me out of my loneliness. So she took me to a local coffee shop, Higher Grounds, where people hung out, and she introduced me to her friends. It was a really cozy place with live bands sometimes, board games you could play, cool music. You didn't get yelled at to leave if you didn't buy anything, so you could be a poor college student and still get to be part of the community. Slowly, I started finding people I really wanted to be around. People who had different ideas and interests than the ones I grew up with in my even smaller town. I gravitated especially towards people in and around the music scene and people I met at my part-time job at a local movie theater. At the same time, photography, which I had picked up as a hobby in elementary school, started to serve a bigger purpose for me. Now, this was a time before smartphones, before everyone had a camera in their pocket. Whatever camera I had at the time when I was growing up was currency for me. It was how I contributed, how I was valuable to the group, from middle school lunches to high school pep rallies, and then into my present self. As MySpace and early Facebook became more prevalent, back when you still needed a college email to even join, having a flattering profile photo or fresh images that showed how fun and cool your life was really mattered a lot. It was the first time people could really broadcast, here's who I am and what I do with my free time to a massive audience. So I took my camera everywhere. I documented everything: shows, bands, friends, nights out. I orchestrated photos. I felt validated every time someone updated their profile picture with something I had taken. It felt like proof that I belonged. But despite all of that, the women that I wanted to hang out with the most didn't invite me to their girls' nights, or to the local taco spot, or just to hang out because. The core group of friends that I made often left me out or would lie to me about where they were going so they could hang out with people who didn't like me instead of being upfront with me or even standing up for me as a friend. No matter what I did, it never quite felt like I was enough to be essential, and I really internalized that. I was already so insecure about my friendships with these women, and I was trying my best to prove my value as a friend so I could fit into the circle I wanted to fit into. Looking back now, I can see something that I couldn't see then. I wanted so badly to be friends with people who fit a certain specific aesthetic and lifestyle that I wasn't concerning myself as to whether they were good people or people who were good for me. I was choosing proximity over alignment. And that's such an easy trap to fall into, especially as women, because so much of our social value is tied to how we're seen. In my late 20s, I started looking into astrology, specifically my birth chart. A birth chart at its most basic is just a snapshot of the sky when you were born. It's pattern recognition, archetypes, themes. And when I read mine, it felt like someone handed me a user manual for my own brain. Seeing my strengths and weaknesses laid out for me so clearly, reading through different aspects and placements and feeling so seen, I felt like I suddenly had the cheat codes for what to expect with my life moving forward. I understand not everyone feels that way, and that's totally fine. I'm not here to push anything on anyone. It's just, it meant something to me, and it's an important step on the stairs to where I am now. At 28, I had a progress report done, which is astrology's way of looking at life in larger thematic chapters instead of day-to-day events. And that report said that around the age of 30, women would play a huge role in my life. It said that women would show up as friends, rivals, mirrors, collaborators, or guides, that I would understand myself better through the lens of other women. I remember reading that and thinking it didn't make sense. These readings had largely hit the nail on the head every time, and I just didn't see how that would happen. Because overall, my experiences trying to make and maintain friendships with women had been negative. I had already resigned myself to the idea that I was just one of those women who got along better with men. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with loving your husband or being best friends with your partner. I adore my husband. But looking back, I was primarily a man-focused woman because I didn't yet understand what I was missing or what I had been protecting myself from based on those earlier experiences. What I didn't know then was that at 30 in 2017, I would start a woman-focused boudoir and maternity photography studio. And what I definitely didn't understand was how much emotional energy it takes to run that kind of business beyond the surface level. That part feels absolutely silly to say nearly a decade later. Of course, the emotional part is like the root of why I'm good at my job and able to keep doing what I do. But I didn't know that going into it. I just knew I was good at pretty pictures, and I thought that would be enough. A couple of years in, I was photographing over 100 women a year. And the thing is, I don't choose every woman who walks through the door. Every woman is not necessarily someone I would have seen at a bar or a show or in class when I was younger and thought, oh my God, I need to be her friend. And I'm sure I wouldn't have been that person for every one of them either. But when you're working in a room with 2 to 4 people for several hours doing something deeply vulnerable, you actually get to know someone. Getting to know people, making sure their authentic selves show through on camera is a huge part of my job and my success. It's something I've come to find that I'm good at doing naturally, and finding the best parts of people, physically or otherwise, then holding up a mirror for them to see it too is my favorite part of the job, hands down. And a serendipitous side effect of that has been making unexpected friends. Women that I wouldn't have approached, and let's be honest, probably wouldn't have approached me because of how we looked or what we represented, have become women that I admire, respect, and even love deeply. That repeated experience quietly dismantled so many of my assumptions. When I started my Facebook group, Amber's Gems, in 2017, I didn't intend for it to become a supportive community. It was just an online presence for my business. I wanted a private place where my clients could share their images without their guy friends or family members watching. A private, safe space, that was it. But I started watching them comment on each other's photos, lifting each other up, praising the same things I praised during sessions, hyping each other up for their own sessions, giving genuine compliments and extending that confidence from the session into the world of the internet. Then we started sharing quotes and articles that made us feel good just because we wanted to pass that feeling along. We started celebrating each other's wins on purpose. We started getting to know each other and finding common ground and interests, all while being supportive through anything we shared. Then we decided to go to dinner together. That first dinner had around 20 women at a local barbecue restaurant, laughing, giggling, talking. You might sit down next to a stranger, but she became a friend quickly. That was the vibe. And it continued. Quieter restaurants where we could actually hear each other. Renting out a community pool, floaties, food, a diamond-shaped piñata one of our gyms made that I filled full of Sephora samples and candy. Group photo sessions, craft parties, Galentine's parties, clothing swaps, picnics. Full-blown fancy attire soirees with photo booths and food and DJs and drag queens entertaining. And through every single one of those events, the goal was the same. Friendship, support. Come as you are, however you're comfortable, and you're welcome. You're wanted as your authentic self. You don't need to change for us. Not because we looked cool, but because the heart was there. Of course, having similar tastes can be a great way to make friends. Liking the same bands or the same activities or the same movies are all ways I've made friends with people that I've remained friends with for years. But denying yourself the opportunity to know people who don't match you aesthetically is a huge disservice. When your morals and ethical values align with someone, differences in taste just aren't that important. Honestly, I love making friends with people who are vastly different from me because I get exposed to new art and new ideas and new ways of living. And it's up to me, as it's up to you, whether I want to include those things in my life. But knowing they exist and respecting the right for them to exist in others is important. Seeing people who don't closely mirror you helps you take a step back, helps you find patience and grace that you might not have found otherwise. So if you've ever felt like you don't belong with women, it might not be because you're bad at friendship. It might be because you were taught to choose proximity over alignment, and that's something that you can unlearn. I'm Amber Lane, this is Unposed, and I'll see you next time.